In the previous video, introducing the concept of energy, I ended with a discussion of energy units. Metric units are the joule, English unit is the calorie, lowercase c, as written here, and you need to memorize the conversion factor between joules and calories. 4.184 joules equals 1 calorie. Notice this conversion factor should be memorized. It's an exact conversion factor, like 2.54 centimeters is equivalent to 1 inch. That means that when you use it in a calculation, sig figs do not apply to it. Let's continue on and now discuss energy and nutrition. And this information is found in section 3.5 of the Chem 2A textbook. We all know that food contains energy. We need to eat food to obtain the energy our body needs for us to live and move and think and watch this video and understand it. Notice that food is an example of potential energy. So I want to come back and illustrate exactly what does it mean to say that chemical energy is a form of potential energy. What are we talking about when we're talking about energy an object possesses due to its position? Well, food is an example of potential energy, and that energy is contained in the chemical bonding of the atoms that make up the food molecules, the fats, carbohydrates, and proteins that we find in food. As we look at the chemical bonding of the atoms and consider the position of electrons relative to the nucleus, that is an idea, or that is a concept of stored energy, just like I can hold this book above the floor, and we know that this book possesses potential energy because gravity could act on it. If I let it go, the book would fall and lose potential energy, speed up, and gain potential energy. So just like this book possesses potential energy due to its position relative to the floor, electrons possess potential energy due to their position relative to the nucleus of atoms. So food high energy molecules contain potential energy due to the position of electrons relative to the nuclei. If you take a look at page 77, figure 3.5 in the text, you'll see a discussion of a calorimeter. And this is a device used to measure the energy content of food. So how do they know what numbers to put on the labels of a food product indicating how many calories are present in it? You can learn about that process, look at the structure of a calorimeter by looking at figure 3.5, page 77. Please note that when we are expressing the energy content present in food, we are going to use the term calorie, but this time with an uppercase C, a capital C. In other words, a dietary calorie is actually equal to 1 kilocalorie, lowercase c, that we were looking at here. Right? So a dietary calorie is equal to 1 kilocalorie, or 1,000 lowercase c calories. If you look on page 77, in the bottom right-hand corner, you will also see a table that has some important information for us to look at. This is table 3.7, and it gives us the energy content per gram of carbohydrate, per gram of fat, and per gram of protein. Notice that carbohydrate and protein each contain the same amount of energy per gram, 4 kilocalories each. But fat is a much higher energy content molecule. 1 gram of fat contains over twice the amount of energy found per gram of carbohydrate and protein. And so we see here the 9 kilocalories per gram, and this is one of the reasons why in human beings fat is the primary storage form of energy, because it's a very compact way of getting a much higher amount of energy per smaller amount of mass compared to either carbohydrate or protein. So let's do an example calculation of how we can use this nutritional information to come up with, say, how many calories are present in a serving of one of my favorite foods, which is cottage cheese. So I actually brought a cottage cheese container from our refrigerator, dug it out, and looked at the label on the back, which gives me nutritional information. How much energy, what's the calorie or kilocalorie content in a serving of cottage cheese? And this is what the label says. They consider a serving to be a half a cup of cottage cheese. And it states that if you eat a half a cup of cottage cheese, that serving will contain 2.5 grams of fat, 6 grams of carbs, and 11 grams of protein. And of course, that explains why I enjoy cottage cheese so much. I like the taste, and I appreciate that it is a high protein food source. So if there is 2.5 grams of fat, 6 grams of carbs, and 11 grams of protein, how many kilocalories, or the more familiar expression, how many calories, dietary calories, capital C, are present in a half a cup of cottage cheese, the standard serving size? Well, let's use this information here to do the calculation. We see that it contains 2.5 grams of fat, and there's 9 kilocalories per gram of fat. We do this calculation, we come up with 22.5 kilocalories or dietary calories in a serving of cottage cheese contributed from the fat in it. And I should state here, this is low-fat cottage cheese on the label. If you used cottage cheese made with whole milk, then the fat content would be higher. So you'd have to check the label for that information. So low-fat cottage cheese, 2.5 grams of fat, contributes 22.5 kilocalories total to what we're consuming. 6 grams of carb multiplied by 4 kilocalories per gram of carbohydrate gives us 24 kilocalories contributed by the carbohydrate component of cottage cheese. And then lastly, the 11 grams of protein. So low-fat cottage cheese contains protein in greatest amount of the 3 major food groups, multiplying by the kilocalorie content per gram of protein. And I see I'm missing my little divider there, so I'll put that in. I don't normally write horizontally for conversion factors, but my space is limited here. So 11 grams of protein times 4 kilocalories per gram of protein gives me 44 kilocalories contributed by the protein in cottage cheese. Adding these 3 numbers up, I come up with 90 kilocalories total. Being a little sloppy with my sig figs, and that's not uncommon when we're doing nutritional calculations. The numbers don't have typically a large number of sig figs present. So doing the calculation, getting 90 kilocalories when you have a serving of a half a cup of low-fat cottage cheese. We did the calculation, and now I'm comparing with the number on the container, and it says that a half a cup of low-fat cottage cheese contains 90 calories or 90 kilocalories. And we understand how that number was obtained.